Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. You sent us a really interesting stack of material this time, a detailed review focused on one specific watch. So our mission today, as always, is to really dig into that source, unpack everything you wanted to know from it, and figure out what makes this particular timepiece tick, especially, its standout technology.
hmm And we're zeroing in on the Tissot PRC 100 Solar. We'll be looking at the design, that unique solar tech inside, and maybe how it fits into Tissot's recent story and the wider watch market too.
Exactly. And Tissot has been, well, they've been having a bit of a moment, haven't they? The source you provided really highlights their recent surge, especially since the PRX kind of grabbed everyone's attention back in 2021.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen them successfully bring back some popular heritage designs,
Right.
like the PR516, for instance, and also pushing into, let's say, accessible technical boundaries, like the Citadel with its carbon case. That was pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Right. So what's fascinating here with this PRC 100 Solar is that they're not just, rehashing another classic design. They seem to be tackling a whole new technical space for them, solar quartz, while also sort of reimagining a familiar line from their past catalog.
So it feels a bit like Tissot is asking, okay, how do we take this momentum we've got and bring a distinctly Swiss approach to the solar watch game,
Hmm.
which, let's be honest, has been pretty heavily dominated by Japanese brands for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this watch is kind of their answer then, positioning themselves as a serious Swiss contender in that arena.
Seems like it, yeah.
Okay, well, let's start with that answer's outward appearance, the case design. The review describes it as, well, a versatile 39 millimeter wide stainless steel case, calls it clean and contemporary.
But the immediate eye catcher, the defining feature really, has got to be that dodecagonal bezel, 12 sides.
Right, that 12-sided shape.
Yeah, it's got this sharp shape, distinctive faceting. And the source makes a point about the execution here.
Mm.
Apparently, it's really impressive, that crisp transition between the brushed top surface and the polished chamfered edges.
Ah, okay, so that contrast in finishing?
Exactly. And it says details like that, done well at this kind of price point,
Mm.
really help it sort of punch above its weight compared to some entry-level
Really?
competition.
Catches the light nicely, I imagine. Now, the review contrasts that bold bezel with the main case body, which it says is simpler,
More conventional.
very simpler with lugs that taper nicely. But there are some gentle facets on the case sides too. Apparently they flow into the bezel's angularity, so it's not just two totally disconnected parts, It feels integrated.
Okay. So the sharpness of the bezel is kind of balanced by these softer elements on the main case. Makes sense. And how does it wear? That's always key.
Well, the review specifically mentions the modest 39 millimeter diameter. That's a great size for a lot of people. And a really thin profile too, only 9.2 millimeter overall thickness.
Wow, 9.2 millimeters, pretty thin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, there's apparently a dramatic lug undercut.
Okay, what does that mean exactly? Undercut.
It's where the underside of the lugs, where they meet the case, is significantly scooped out.
Right.
It just helps the watch sit lower and hug the wrist better, makes it more comfortable, essentially.
Ah, gotcha. Comfort engineering.
Pretty much. The reviewer noted it fit their 6.75-inch wrist really well, felt nice and low, and around the back, nothing fancy. Simple, brushed, solid case back. And it's rated for a solid 100 meters of water resistance.
Mm,
So, genuinely practical for everyday stuff.
good. So it looks sharp, seems built to be worn comfortably.
Right.
Okay. Now, let's dive into the real headline here, maybe. The technology powering this thing. This is where Tissot seems to be introducing something genuinely novel, according to the source.
Right. They're calling it Lightmaster Solar Quartz Technology.
Mm,
And the critical difference, which the source really highlights, is how it absorbs light energy.
okay.
Well, most solar watches, they have a light-sensitive dial, maybe it's a bit translucent, or sometimes a ring around the edge, the rehelp that gathers the energy.
Right, I've seen those.
But Tissot, they gather the energy through the underside of the sapphire crystal.
The underside of the glass. Seriously.
Exactly. Now, think about that for a second. The benefit here is potentially huge. If the light-gathering element isn't the dial itself,
Hmm.
well, you're suddenly freed up. You can use more traditional, opaque, and, visually interesting dial finishing techniques. You don't need a see-through dial anymore.
Huh. So you get the convenience of solar power without the usual aesthetic compromises that sometimes come with it. That's clever.
It really is. The source does mention you can see this light-gathering layer under the crystal if you look closely. It describes it looking like a hexagonal or honeycomb mesh.
Okay.
But, and this seems important, they stress that it's far, far more subtle in person than maybe some images might suggest. Not distracting.
which, as you said, directly enables the design on the dial surface itself. The review calls the dial clean, simple, and handsomely executed, precisely because they weren't restricted by needing it to be transparent or semi-transparent.
Yeah, and they highlight the finishing. Apparently, the smooth, finely detailed graining on the silver sunburst surface is particularly refined for this price range. And there's a nice layered effect, too. A raised outer minute scale, radially brushed, sits just above the main dial area, gives it some depth.
Okay. And what about the hands and indices?
Looking at the hands, they're described as a blunted Dauphine style. They have these recessed, brushed central stripes, which are complemented by polished outer edges. There's a nice bit of detail that echoes the case finishing.
Ah, tying it all together.
Seems like it. Then you've got simple beveled baton indices and an unframed date window over at 3 o'clock. Pretty standard layout there.
So the overall impression, reading between the lines of the review, it sounds like the design itself isn't maybe revolutionary or super innovative,
Right.
but the combination of the varied finishing techniques, the brushing, the polishing, the graining, and the balance of proportions, that stops it from feeling plain or dull.
Exactly. It's a classic look, but elevated by the quality of the execution, which is enabled by that underlying tech.
Okay, makes sense. Now, powering everything is the ETA Efferjo 6.615 quartz movement. The review says this movement offers genuinely competitive performance compared to, say, leading Japanese rivals in the solar space.
And competitive here likely means, reliable, accurate quartz performance from a respected Swiss movement maker like ETA. It's what you'd expect, really.
Yeah.
It's a quality Swiss quartz engine. What of the actual specs mentioned?
Yes, specs. It apparently boasts a substantial 14-month power reserve on a full charge.
14 months is solid. Very solid.
But here's where it gets really impressive, from a practical standpoint anyway. The rapid charging capability.
Oh.
Get this. It can apparently absorb a full 24 hours worth of running power in only 10 minutes of sunlight exposure.
Wow, 10 minutes for a full day. That's genuinely fast, really practical.
Right. That makes it incredibly easy for daily wear. You don't need to consciously baby it or leave it on a windowsill for hours just to keep it topped up.
No, just some casual exposure during the day, maybe a quick blast of sunlight now and then, should easily keep it going indefinitely. That's a huge convenience factor.
Definitely. Okay, and the watch comes on a bracelet.
Yes, a classic stainless steel H-link bracelet.
Yeah.
Secured with a hidden butterfly deployant clasp, which gives a cleaner look. The review notes a cool visual detail here, too.
Yeah.
There's an interesting interplay between the gently curving brushed H-links
Okay.
and the more angular center links. These center links are apparently split between brushed upper surfaces and then these abrupt, polished chamfers on the edges.
Ah, so mixing curves and angles, brushed and polished, even on the bracelet links.
Exactly. Sounds like it adds just enough visual flair to what could otherwise be a very standard sort of bracelet. The source says this touch of brightness makes it a solid everyday option, comfortable, versatile, but with a little visual pop.
Okay, so let's try and bring all these pieces together from the source material you sent. We've got Tissot's recent kind of hot streak, the reimagined PRC 100 design itself, the practical wearability with that thin case and undercut.
It's a nicely finished dial, which is possible because of this really unique Lightmaster Solar Quartz tech, and then the capable ETA movement inside with that seriously impressive rapid charging.
Yeah, when you lay it all out like that, it really seems Tissot has managed to deliver a pretty compelling package here. A versatile, good-looking watch that blends some heritage cues with genuine technical innovation in the solar space. It successfully updates a popular older line and offers a distinctly Swiss take on light power timekeeping.
And all available now through authorized dealers, the source says, at an MSRP of $525 USD. Which, I mean, considering the feature set, the build quality described, and that unique tech, it seems like quite a strong value proposition.
It certainly looks that way on paper, yeah. It suggests Tissot isn't just resting on its laurels from the PRX success. They're actively pushing into new territory with some clever engineering. It definitely raises an important question, something for you to think about as you consider this watch and the review you shared with us. What does this Lightmaster Solar Quartz Technology, gathering energy through the crystal's underside, actually mean for the future of solar watch design?
That's a good point. Could this approach, the one that enables more varied and traditional dial aesthetics, could it become a new standard? Not just for Tissot, maybe, but potentially across the industry, allowing more diversity in how solar watches look.
It's definitely something interesting to mull over. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Tissot PRC 100 Solar based on the great source material you sent in.